The envelope arrived without a return address, just a heavy square of cream cardstock that smelled of expensive vanilla. Inside lay the invitation to my daughter's wedding. I scanned the elegant calligraphy for my name under the family section, but it was gone. Another woman's name had taken my place. 3 days later, Willa called. She did not want me at the ceremony, but she demanded my beach house for her honeymoon. My name is Daphne O'Keefe, and at 58 years old, living in the biting cold of Marrow Bay, Maine, I thought I understood the limits of humiliation. I was wrong. The mail carrier had just delivered a heavy cream envelope that smelled of vanilla and expensive pretension. It was the invitation to my daughter's wedding. I stood in my hallway, the draft from the harbour chilling my ankles, and scanned the elegant calligraphy. It was not a request for my presence. It was a notification. My eyes dropped to the bottom section listed as family of the bride. The air left my lungs. My name was not there. Instead, printed in gold script where Daphne O'Keefe should have been, was the name Celeste Klein, her fiancé's aunt. For the past 7 years, my relationship with Willa had been a one-way street paved with my credit cards. She drifted away when her life was vibrant, chasing a lifestyle I could not afford to give her. But the moment a bill arrived, or she needed a co-signer, she remembered I existed. I had paid off her student loans. I had covered her rent in the city 3 times when she was between jobs. Yet here I was, erased from the most significant day of her life, replaced by a woman whose only qualification was a last name that carried weight in the country club set. I looked out the window toward the grey, churning Atlantic. 10 miles down the coast sat Gull Haven. I bought that beach house with the settlement money after my divorce. Scraping together every cent I had left after 20 years of marriage collapsed under the weight of my ex-husband's infidelity. Gull Haven was not just wood and glass. It was the only asset I owned that no one else had a claim to. It was my sanctuary. The phone rang in my hand, startling me. It was Willa. She did not wait for a hello. "Mom, did you get the mail? Good. Listen. Beau and I need Gull Haven for 2 weeks, starting the 16th. We decided to do a domestic honeymoon. We need it to be private and chic." She did not ask. She demanded. There was no apology for the invitation, no explanation for the name Celeste Klein replacing mine. She simply assumed that because I was her mother, my property was her birthright. "Mum, are you there? You don't use it in October anyway. It's just sitting there gathering dust." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her how she could be so cruel. But Willa was faster. She knew exactly where to slide the knife. "Look, Mom, I know you might feel a certain way about the guest list, but this wedding is complicated. It's a production. If you cause a scene or make this difficult about the house, well, Beau and I have discussed boundaries. We won't feel comfortable letting you be around our future children if you can't respect our process now." She was holding my hypothetical grandchildren hostage before they were even conceived. It was a soft ultimatum, delivered with a voice sweet as molasses, but the venom was unmistakable. I took a breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down. I needed to think like the risk manager I used to be. "Who told you to do this?" "Willa, that doesn't sound like you." There was a pause on the line, a hesitation. "It's not. Nobody told me. Beau and I just have a media plan. We need the aesthetic of the beach house for the honeymoon shoot. It's part of the brand we're building. Just say yes." "Mom, Don't make it hard. I looked at the invitation lying on the table, the gold letters mocking me. She did not want a mother. She wanted a venue. I'll check the dates, I said, my voice flat. I hung up before she could say another word. I walked over to the side table and pulled open the drawer. Inside lay the heavy brass ring of keys to Gull Haven. The metal was cold against my fingertips. I felt the sting of tears behind my eyes, hot and sudden. But I refused to let them fall. If I cried, I was just a victim. If I stayed dry, I was an opponent. They wanted to play a game of appearances and assets. I closed my fingers around the keys until the metal bit into my palm. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. We play by your rules. I would give them the house. But they had no idea what the cost would be. I still remembered the smell of Frank's jacket when he came home from a shift. It was a mix of diesel fuel, salt spray, and damp wool. He was a Coast Guard officer, a hero to the town of Marrow Bay, but a stranger in our bed. When the marriage ended, it was not with a scream, but with the quiet slide of divorce papers across a kitchen table. He left me for a younger dispatcher, and I was left with a silence so loud it rang in my ears. But I did not crumble. I went to work. For 20 years, I was a senior risk manager at the North Shore Compliance Bureau. My job was not to be liked. It was to look at a stack of documents and find the one line that did not add up. I learned to read fine print. And more importantly, I learned to read the hesitation in a person's voice when they were trying to hide a liability. I knew how to spot a disaster before it made landfall. There was a time when Willa was my shadow. We used to walk the shoreline hunting for sea glass, her small hand gripping mine like an anchor. But somewhere between college and the city, that grip loosened. She discovered a world of filters and aesthetics. She stopped wanting to be happy and started wanting to be envied. The shift was subtle at first. A changed accent, a disdain for store-brand coffee. Then it became a hunger. Then came Beau Klein. On paper, he was perfect. He wore tailored suits and opened doors with a flourish that charmed the neighbours. But in my kitchen, the mask slipped. He would look at my oak cabinets, solid and practical, and give a thin, pitying smile. It's very quaint. Daphne, he would say, dragging out the word as if it tasted bad. A bit old-fashioned, isn't it? Willa is used to something more curated. She doesn't really fit this rustic vibe anymore. He made me feel like a relic in my own home, a piece of furniture that clashed with their modern decor. Willa began to treat me as an accessory she could pick up or put down depending on her needs. I became a utility. I was the safety net they resented needing. Over the years, I paid off credit card bills that had maxed out on designer shoes. I covered the tuition for a graphic design course Willa dropped after 3 weeks. Every time, she would hug me, but her eyes would already be looking past my shoulder. "Thanks, Mom," she would say, her voice light and breezy. "You know I'll pay you back when the brand takes off. I just need this bridge loan to keep things moving." It was never a loan. It was a tribute payment. I had tolerated the financial drain because I told myself that is what mothers do. We give until we are hollow. But this wedding invitation was different. This was not about money. This was an excision. By removing my name and replacing it with Celeste's, Willa was rewriting history. She was curating a family tree that looked better on social media. I was the stump they wanted to grind down so the photo would look clean. The realization settled in my stomach like cold lead. My instincts from the bureau flared up. Coincidence is rarely innocent. just 2 hours after the mail arrived. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Gable, who lived 2 houses down from Gull Haven. She was a nosy woman, but today, her curiosity was useful. She said a man in a blue sedan had stopped by my beach house. He did not knock. He walked right up to the front door and took close-up photos of the keypad lock. I thought you should know. Daphne. She had texted. It looked like he was studying the mechanism. He stayed for maybe 5 minutes and then drove off. They were not just asking for the house. They were casing it. I set the phone down on the counter. The risk assessment was complete. My daughter and her fiancé were not just ungrateful. They were planning something, and they had already started the operation. I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and a pen, treating the situation not as a family dispute, but as a case file. I dialed the number for Ivy and Wren Events, the high-end firm handling the wedding. The phone rang 3 times before a breathless assistant answered. I identified myself clearly. This is Daphne O'Keefe. I am calling to clarify my seating arrangement and access for the ceremony. There was a long silence on the other end, followed by the click of a keyboard. When the voice returned, it was tight and guarded. Oh, Mrs. O'Keefe. Yes. I am looking at the protocol notes here. I am afraid I can't discuss specific logistics with you. We have a directive from the couple. A directive I asked. Keeping my tone even. Read it to me, please. I'm not sure I should. If I am not invited, I need to know why. If I am invited but restricted, I need to know the parameters. Read the note. The girl sighed, likely realizing it was easier to talk than to argue. It says here, Mother of the bride is emotionally sensitive and prone to outbursts. Do not issue backstage credentials. Direct all inquiries to the groom's liaison. I am sorry. Mrs. O'Keefe. My hand tightened around the pen, but I did not snap. They had painted me as unstable to the vendors to justify cutting me out. It was a preemptive strike. Thank you, I said, my voice cold. Please forward that email chain to me for my records. I want to ensure I don't accidentally violate these boundaries. She agreed, sounding relieved to get me off the line. I hung up and immediately opened my laptop. I logged into the security system for Gull Haven. I scrolled through the access history for the past week. Most of it was standard: the cleaning crew on Tuesday, the landscaper on Thursday. But then I saw it. A failed login attempt on the smart lock. It happened last Saturday at 2:13 in the morning. Someone had tried to access the administrative settings remotely, not to open the door, but to change the master code. They failed because my firewall was stronger than they expected. I grabbed my coat and drove into town to the county clerk's office. I needed to see if the digital intrusion had a physical counterpart. I knew the clerk, a woman named Janice, who had been there for 20 years. She looked up when I walked in. Daphne, she said, adjusting her glasses. Funny you're here. We had a call about your property just yesterday. Is that so? I leaned against the counter. Was it Willa? The caller ID said Klein Holdings, but it was a man's voice, very polite. He said he was representing your daughter. He wanted to know the procedure for a temporary title transfer to facilitate a short-term liability waiver for a vacation stay. He asked if we could expedite a deed transfer if all parties were present. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. A temporary title transfer. There was no such thing. Once you signed a deed over, it was gone. They were not trying to borrow the house. They were trying to trick me into signing it away under the guise of insurance paperwork. Did he leave a name? He said he was an assistant, but he had a very specific way of talking. He kept saying, "Per the family's request." I thanked Janice and walked out into the cold wind. I dialed Rowena Pike. Rowena was a retired insurance adjuster who could smell a scam from 3 towns over. We met at a coffee shop near the docks. I laid out the timeline, the excluded invitation, the demand for the house, the failed login, and the inquiry about the deed. Rowena took a sip of her black coffee and looked me dead in the eye. "That is not a honeymoon. Daphne, that is a hostile takeover. They are setting a trap. If you sign a vague contract, or if they slip a deed transfer into a stack of rental agreements, you will lose that house. And with the emotionally unstable narrative they are planting with the wedding planner, they will say you signed it over in a fit of generosity and then forgot because you are confused. So I say no," I said. Rowena shook her head. "If you say no, they cut you off from the grandkids. You lose the war. You have to say yes, but you dictate the terms. You bury them in paper." I nodded slowly. The plan formed in my mind, sharp and clear. "I will give them the house," I said. "But I am going to draft a contract so tight they won't be able to breathe without my permission." Rowena smiled, a grim expression that matched my own. "Get everything in writing. Daphne. Every nail, every hour, every access code. Make them sign it in blood if you have to." I drove home, the decision made. I would play the role of the submissive, aging mother. I would let them think they had won. And then I would hand them a pen. Willa arrived at my doorstep the next morning with 2 cups of expensive coffee and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She wore a beige cashmere coat that I knew cost more than my first car. She breezed into the kitchen, placing the cup in front of me, but she refused to sit down. She paced the linoleum floor, her heels clicking a nervous rhythm. "I brought the paperwork for the house," she said, avoiding my gaze. "But first, we need to clear the air. About the wedding." I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. "I am listening." She stopped pacing and looked at the refrigerator, examining a magnet from a trip we took 10 years ago. "You have to understand. Mom, this wedding is my brand. It is the launch of our lifestyle blog. It has to be curated. You make things messy. You get emotional. You have the look on your face like you are analyzing everyone. It makes people uncomfortable. It ruins the vibe." I took a slow sip of coffee. It was bitter. "And the invitation," I asked, "under family of the bride. Who is Celeste Klein?" Willa flinched slightly but smoothed her expression back into a mask of indifference. "Aunt Celeste is Beau's godmother. She is very elegant. She understands the industry. She agreed to walk me down the aisle. It just looks better for the photos. Mom, it tells a cohesive story of legacy and wealth. You understand, don't you? It is just marketing." I felt a crack form in the center of my chest, a physical pain that threatened to double me over. I had raised her. I had nursed her through fevers and heartbreaks. Now I was being edited out of the narrative because I did not fit the aesthetic. I forced the pain down, burying it under layers of ice. "I see," I said. "I am not the mother you need for the photo op. Fine. Let's talk about the house." Willa looked relieved. She reached into her designer bag and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "It is just a standard agreement." Beau typed it up. "Just sign it so we can get the keys and start prepping the honeymoon content." I picked up the paper. It was laughable. There were no dates, no liability clauses, and no insurance stipulations. It was essentially a blank check granting them access to my property. Willa, this is not a contract. It is a permission slip. Who pays if the pipes burst? Who is liable if one of your guests slips on the deck? It says access for duration of stay, but it doesn't define the duration. This could mean 2 weeks or 2 years. Willa's face flushed pink. God. Mum, you are always so controlling. It is a family favor, not a corporate merger. Why do you have to ruin everything with rules? Before I could answer, her phone buzzed. She tapped the screen and held it up. Beau's face filled the frame, pixelated and smug. Is there a problem? Babe? He asked. Mom is nitpicking the agreement, Willa said, her voice turning into a whine. Beau chuckled. Daphne, come on. It is just a beach house. You are making a mountain out of a molehill. Just sign the paper and let your daughter be happy for once. I looked at his face on the screen. He thought I was a foolish old woman clinging to power. He had no idea he was talking to a woman who used to audit industrial accidents for a living. I will let you use the house, I said, my voice steady. Willa brightened. Really, yes. But not on this napkin you call a contract. We will do this properly. You will meet me at Hallow and Sloane tomorrow at 10 in the morning. We will sign a short-term lease agreement. There will be a security deposit and a pre-occupancy inventory check. If you want the house, you follow the law. Beau rolled his eyes on the screen. Unbelievable. Fine. Whatever makes you feel important. Daphne. Willa took the phone back. She looked at me, and for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to cry when she scraped her knee. But then she straightened her coat, and the influencer mask slid back into place. Fine. We will sign your stupid papers. But, Mum, this doesn't change anything about the wedding. You are still not coming. But, since you are saving so much money on travel and a dress, you can send a big gift. Something from the registry. The top-tier items start at $5,000. She turned and walked out the door without looking back. I sat there in the silence of my kitchen. I did not cry. I simply stood up, walked to the door, and turned the deadbolt. I heard the heavy click of the lock engaging. It was the sound of a chapter ending. No, I whispered. I am not sending a gift. I am the gift. The reception area of Hallow and Sloane LLP smelled of old paper and mahogany, a scent that always calmed me. I did not come here for comfort, though I came for armor. I sat across from Elias Sloane, a man who had handled my divorce settlement years ago. He read through my notes, his eyebrows knitting together. You want a short-term occupancy agreement? Elias said, tapping his pen on the desk. Not a lease. Not a guest invitation. You want a contract that explicitly denies tenancy rights. Exactly, I said. I want it to state that if they stay 1 hour past the checkout time, they are trespassing. I want clauses for damages, unauthorized guests, and commercial use. If they film a commercial in my living room, I want to be able to shut it down. Elias leaned forward, his expression grave. Daphne, this is family. But if you are worried they might try to convert a favor into a claim of ownership, you are right to be cautious. We have seen cases where lending a property turns into a nightmare of eviction proceedings. If they establish residency, getting them out could take months. We will draft this so tight air cannot get through it. I left the office with the promise of a draft by the afternoon. My next stop was Gull Haven. I did not go to enjoy the view. I brought a technician to install a new smart lock system on the front and back doors. I set the master code myself. Something complex that Willa would never guess. I also had him upgrade the perimeter cameras to high-definition models with audio recording capability. I kept every invoice, filing them into a folder labeled Maintenance and Upgrades. Every dollar spent proved I was the active, responsible owner. Inside the house, I went to the master suite closet. I bolted a small, fireproof safe to the floorboards in the back corner. Inside, I placed the original deed to the house, the current insurance policy, and a handwritten letter addressed to Willa. I locked it. It was a time capsule she would only find if she pushed me too far. My phone rang as I was driving back to town. It was the manager at Tideglass Property Care, Mrs. O'Keefe. "We received your request," the manager said. "You want a full inventory inspection 24 hours before the guests arrive and another one immediately after they leave." "Yes," I answered. "I want photos of every room, count the silverware, check the condition of the rugs. Treat this like a high-risk rental. Understood? We will schedule the crew." By the time I got home, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my kitchen. I poured a glass of water and checked my messages. Rowena had left a voicemail. Her voice sounded tight, angry. "Daphne, you need to hear this. I was at the club today. Beau is playing golf with some investors. He is loud. Daphne, he was telling them that the beach house is basically a done deal. He said. The old lady is losing her grip. She will sign whatever we put in front of her. It is practically Willa's inheritance coming early." I almost threw my drink at him. I deleted the voicemail, but not before saving a copy to my external hard drive. I had looked up the state statutes on recording conversations. I was now documenting everything. Every text from Willa. Every voicemail. Every interaction was being catalogued. I was building a timeline. I sat down at my computer to organize the files, and that was when the email arrived. It landed in my inbox with a soft ping. There was no subject line. The sender address was a string of random numbers and letters. I clicked it open. There was no text in the body of the email, just a single attachment. It was a screenshot of a text message conversation. The contact name at the top was Beau. The message from Beau read, "Just got to get her to sign the occupancy waiver. Once we are in, we change the locks and claim tenancy. It worked in Florida. She won't have the stomach to evict her own daughter." Below the image, the anonymous sender had typed one line, "If you sign, you lose it. They did this to others." I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. My hands were not shaking. I felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. This was not a wedding drama. It was a heist, and I was the vault they intended to crack. I reached for the phone to call Elias Sloane back. The contract needed to be sharper. It needed to be a trap. The screenshot from the anonymous email was a breadcrumb, and I followed it all the way to a civil court database in Broward County, Florida. It took me 3 hours of cross-referencing public records to find the docket. The case was titled Klein versus Henderson. 4 years ago, Beau had rented a luxury villa for a summer, refused to leave when the lease expired, and then countersued the owners for harassment when they tried to change the locks. He claimed he had established residency and demanded a relocation settlement. He walked away with $15,000 to avoid a drawn-out trial. It was a grift. It was a pattern. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the dark room. Willa did not know this. Or perhaps she did know, and she had filed it away under the category of things she ignored to keep the fantasy of her perfect life intact. To Willa, Beau was a visionary. To me, He was a parasite, looking for a new host. I saw them the next evening at the Save the Harbour charity gala. I was not invited, but I had bought a ticket months ago as a donor. I wore my black suit, the one I used to wear to board meetings when I had to deliver bad news. I stood near the champagne tower, watching. Willa was glowing, clinging to Beau's arm. But it was Celeste Klein who approached me. She moved through the crowd like a shark in silk, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. "Daphne," she said, her voice smooth and devoid of warmth. "I didn't expect to see you here. It is a bit awkward, isn't it? I live here." "Celeste," I replied, taking a sip of sparkling water. "I have supported this charity for 20 years. Celeste sighed, a sound of practiced pity. She stepped closer, invading my personal space just enough to be dominant. "Look, we all want what is best for Willa. The family needs a clean image. This friction with you, it tests well with some demographics, but it worries the sponsors. We need unity?" She paused, waiting for me to break. I did not. "If you cooperate with the house transfer," Celeste continued, lowering her voice, "and stop this legal posturing with the contracts, we are willing to make a concession. You won't be at the ceremony. Of course, that is for the cameras, but we could put you on the list for the after party. Late night? Casual? You could see Willa then. As a guest? It was a crumb thrown to a starving dog. They were offering me the chance to sneak into my own daughter's wedding reception after the photographers had gone home. That is very generous," I said, my smile tight and sharp. "Good," Celeste said, mistaking my sarcasm for submission. "We will send over the revised papers." She walked away, confident she had handled the problem. I watched her go, cataloguing every word. They thought I was desperate for connection. They did not realize I was collecting evidence of coercion. But the real blow came the next morning. A courier delivered a certified letter from a financial firm I did not recognize. Inside was a demand for payment regarding a business loan taken out when Willa was 25. I had co-signed it to help her start a boutique that failed 6 months later. The letter claimed that I had defaulted on my portion of the obligation and that Willa had absorbed the debt. They were claiming I owed my daughter $25,000. They were using this fabricated debt as leverage to justify taking the beach house. Mom owes me, so Mom gives me the house. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank's archival department immediately. My voice was steady, the voice of a woman who had spent decades managing risk. "I need the full transaction history for loan number 4599. I told the representative, "I need proof of the payoff wire transfer I sent 7 years ago." "Yes, the full amount. I want it notarized." I knew I had paid that debt. I had paid every cent of it to keep Willa's credit score from tanking. Now, they were trying to rewrite history to make me the villain. I drove out to the cliffs overlooking the ocean and parked the car. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence. My hands were resting on the steering wheel, and I noticed they were trembling. It was not fear. It was the devastating clarity of the situation. Willa was not just a bride under stress. She was a participant in a scheme to strip me of everything I had left. She was being led by people who viewed family loyalty as a currency to be spent, and she had decided that I was the one who would pay the bill. "Okay," I whispered to the windshield. "If you want to talk about debt, let's look at the ledger." The conference room at Hallow and Sloane was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. I sat on one side of the long mahogany table with Elias, my attorney. On the other side sat Willa, Beau, and a man I had never met before. He was introduced as Grant Della, a financial advisor. He wore a suit that was too shiny and a smile that showed too many teeth. He did not look like an advisor. He looked like a fixer. Grant slid a thick document across the table toward me. It was not the simple occupancy agreement Elias had drafted. It was a heavy stack of papers. "We took the liberty of adding an addendum," Grant said, his voice smooth. "It is just standard language regarding property upkeep. It grants the temporary occupants the right to make discretionary upgrades and repairs during their stay to ensure the property meets their specific living standards." I picked up the document and pretended to squint at the fine print. I knew exactly what this was. If I signed this, they could tear out my kitchen cabinets, install a marble island I did not ask for, and then bill me for the improvement. Or worse, they could use the investment in renovations to claim an equitable interest in the property. It was a classic adverse possession trap, wrapped in the guise of home improvement. "I am confused," I said, keeping my voice soft and wavering. "Why would you need to make upgrades for a honeymoon? You are only staying for 2 weeks." Bo sighed loudly and drummed his fingers on the table. He looked at Willa, rolling his eyes. "It is about comfort." "Daphne," Bo snapped, "the place is rustic. If the water heater breaks or we want to install better lighting for the ambiance, we shouldn't have to call you every 5 minutes for permission. We are trying to help you increase the value of your asset." "But this clause here," I said, pointing to paragraph 4. "It says the owner must reimburse the occupants for capital improvements within 30 days. That sounds expensive. I don't think I have the budget for that. It is just a safety net." Bo's voice rose, cracking with irritation. "My God, you make everything so difficult. Just sign the damn paper so we can get on with our lives." Elias reached over and pulled the document out of my hands. He did not even look at Grant. He looked straight at Willa. "Mrs. O'Keefe will not be signing this. We are reverting to the original short-term occupancy agreement. No renovations, no changes to the structure, no unauthorized guests, no parties. Any violation of these terms results in immediate termination of the contract and immediate eviction. Take it or leave it." Grant's smile faltered. He whispered something to Bo, but Willa slammed her hand down on the table. "Fine," she shouted. "We don't have time for this. The schedule is already tight. Just give me the pen." Willa snatched the original contract and scribbled her signature at the bottom. She was shaking, not with fear, but with the rage of someone who is not used to hearing the word no. As she pushed the paper back to me, her phone lit up on the table. It was face up. I glanced down and saw an email notification flash across the screen. "Subject production schedule, Gull Haven, brand activation, setup, 8 a.m. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Brand activation, setup. This was not a honeymoon. They were using my home as a commercial set. They had likely sold the exclusive rights to cover their wedding to a magazine or a sponsor. And my house was the backdrop they had promised. They were going to monetize my sanctuary. I picked up the pen, but I did not sign. Not yet. "One more thing?" I said, my voice dropping the confused grandmother act. "Since the schedule is so tight, I want to ensure the house is perfect for you. I am adding a clause. A full property inspection by Tide Glass Property Care exactly 24 hours before you pick up the keys. If they find anything out of place, or if the house is not ready, we delay possession." "That is ridiculous." Bo spat. "We need to get in early to settle in?" "To settle in." "Or to set up?" I asked, holding his gaze. Willa froze. She looked at me, her eyes widening, She knew that I knew. Fine, Willa said, her voice barely a whisper. Do the inspection. Just sign the paper. I signed my name next to hers. The ink was dark and permanent. I handed the folder to Elias. The meeting was over. As we stood up to leave, Bo leaned in close to me. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. You think you are clever, he muttered, low enough that only I could hear. But you just signed over access. You won a victory on paper. Daphne, that's all. I picked up my purse and looked him dead in the eye. I am not looking for a victory, Bo, I said calmly. I am looking for the truth, and I am only just beginning. The day of the wedding arrived with a grey, relentless drizzle that battered the windows of my living room. I sat in my armchair, wrapped in a wool blanket, with my phone glowing in the dim light. I had no ticket. I had no seat at the table. But thanks to the public nature of modern vanity, I had a front-row view of my own erasure. My feed was flooded with updates. Willa and Bo forever. The Klein dynasty. The photos were professionally edited, uploaded in real time by a social media team. And then I saw it. A portrait of Willa, looking radiant in white lace, her head resting on Celeste Klein's shoulder. Celeste looked regal in silver, playing the part of the matriarch to perfection. The caption hit me like a physical blow to the chest, so grateful for the woman who taught me everything about love and elegance. Thank you for walking me into my future. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin, Nora, who lived 3 states away. Daphne, I am at the reception. It is beautiful. But everyone is whispering. Bo's mother told the table you couldn't make it because of your health issues. She said you were too fragile for the excitement. Is everything okay? I stared at the words. Fragile. Sick. That was the narrative they had chosen. It was cleaner than the truth. If I was sick, my absence was a tragedy they could milk for sympathy. If I was excluded, they were monsters. I did not reply to Nora. I did not post a correction status. I let the lie sit there. Silence is a weapon if you know how to hold it. My landline rang, breaking the spell. It was the manager from Tide Glass Property Care, Mrs. O'Keefe. We are doing the pre-handover check at Gull Haven. The house is pristine. However, a courier just dropped off a large shipment. It was marked urgent. It is addressed to a Mrs. Willa Klein. She had used her married name before the vows were even exchanged. I am coming down, I said. Do not let the delivery driver leave. I drove to the beach house in the rain. Under the terms of the occupancy agreement, I had the right to inspect any deliveries made to the property prior to the guest's arrival to ensure safety compliance. I walked into the foyer where 3 large crates sat on the hardwood floor. I pulled out my pocket knife and sliced the tape on the largest box. It was not luggage. It was a portable studio. Inside were collapsible lighting rigs, heavy-duty power strips, and a rolled-up vinyl backdrop printed with the logos of a vodka brand and a luxury skincare line. I dug deeper and found a folder. It contained a brand activation schedule. They were not planning a honeymoon. They were planning a 2-week content production. My phone rang again. It was Rowena. Daphne. You are not going to believe this, she said, her voice breathless. I just saw the final guest transport list for the honeymoon getaway. It is not just the happy couple. Bo has chartered a minibus. He is bringing 12 people, influencers, photographers, a stylist. He is turning your house into a frat party for the internet. I know, I said, Looking at the commercial lighting equipment, I have the evidence right here. So you are cancelling the contract, Rowena asked. You have them on intent to violate commercial use clauses. You can pull the plug right now. I looked at the crates. If I cancelled now, they would spin it. They would say I was jealous, petty, and spiteful. They would tell the world I ruined their honeymoon because I was mentally unstable. No, I said, my voice cold. I am going to let them in. I am going to let them set up. I want them to feel comfortable. I want them to break the rules so loudly that no lawyer in the state can defend them. We stick to the plan. I instructed the Tide Glass manager to leave the boxes exactly where they were. I drove back home, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm. Just as I walked through my front door, Willa called. The ceremony was an hour away. Her voice was sharp, tight with stress. Mom, the property manager said you were at the house. What were you doing there? I was verifying the inventory, I said. Standard procedure. You are trying to sabotage this, aren't you? Willa hissed. You can't stand that I am happy without you. Listen to me. If you do anything at all to mess up this honeymoon, I swear to God, I will cut you off completely. You will never see me again. I stood in the dark hallway, listening to the daughter I had raised, the girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged, threaten me for the last time. You don't have to worry about cutting me off. Willa, I said softly. What is that supposed to mean? It means, I said, looking at the empty space on my wall where her graduation picture used to hang, that you cut me off a long time ago. Enjoy your party. I hung up the phone. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for the prey to walk in. While 200 guests toasted to my daughter's happiness in a ballroom, I was banned from entering. I drove my sedan through the slick, rain-darkened streets toward Gull Haven. I did not go there to wallow in self-pity. I went there to close the steel jaws of the trap I had set. The house stood against the grey sky, a monument to the life I had built without help. I parked around the back, hidden by the overgrown sea oats, and met the Tide Glass manager, Mr. Henderson, at the wooden dock. We have documented everything, Mrs. O'Keefe. Mr. Henderson said, handing me a tablet. We applied the tamper-evident seals to the owner's closet and the garage storage as requested. But you should see this footage from the dock camera. He played a video file time-stamped 40 minutes ago. A small motorboat had pulled up to my private pier. 2 men jumped out, hauling heavy black cases that looked suspiciously like generators and sound equipment. They bypassed the front door smart lock entirely, stashing the gear under the deck top. They are staging the site before they even have the keys, I said, my voice devoid of surprise. Get the license number of that boat. I want it added to the breach of contract file. I sat on the covered porch, the salt spray misting my face, and pulled up a background check I had requested on Grant Della. The report had just cleared. He was not a certified financial planner. He was a consultant for a firm in Nevada that specialized in distressed asset acquisition. His entire career was built on convincing elderly people to liquidate their property for pennies on the dollar or tricking them into predatory reverse mortgages. Beau had not brought a friend to the negotiation. He had brought a butcher. My phone rang. The screen displayed unknown caller. I hesitated, then answered. Hello. Is this Daphne O'Keefe? The voice was female, shaky, and sounded like she'd been crying or drinking, or perhaps both. Yes. Who is this? My name is Sarah. I was married to Beau Klein 5 years ago, in Chicago. My grip on the phone tightened. Why are you calling me? Sarah. I saw the wedding hashtag. I saw the pictures of the house. You need to listen to me. Beau doesn't just marry women. He marries their credit limits. He marries their family assets. He did it to me. He convinced me to take out a second mortgage for a business venture that never existed. When the divorce happened, I was left with the debt, and he walked away with the settlement. He is doing it again. He is going to use that wedding to leverage Willa into debt she can't pay, and then he is going to take your house to cover it. I felt a cold shiver that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. I need proof. I said, I cannot act on a stranger's word. Check your messages. The line went dead. A moment later, an image loaded on my screen. It was a photo of a court summons for bankruptcy, with Beau Klein listed as a creditor. Below that was a screenshot of a text message from a number I recognized as Beau's. It was dated 3 weeks ago. The text read, "The mother is a pushover. I will have the deed to the beach house within 6 months. It is my retirement plan." I lowered the phone. The sound of the waves crashing against the pilings seemed to grow louder, filling the silence in my head. My daughter was not in love. She was a mark. She was the target of a long con, and she was so desperate for the image of a perfect life that she had blinded herself to the reality. I opened my email app. I did not write a long, emotional plea. I did not beg for forgiveness for sins I had not committed. I typed a single line to Willa. I have something you need to see, but I will not beg you to look at it. The choice is yours. I attached the screenshot and hit send. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in my skirt. I was ready to leave, to let the chips fall where they might, when headlights swept across the front yard. I froze. It was 8 in the evening. The reception was supposed to go until midnight. The handover was not scheduled until tomorrow morning. A black SUV crunched over the gravel driveway and screeched to a halt. It was too early for the bride. The car door opened, and a figure stepped out into the rain. It was not Willa. The heavy boots hit the ground with a thud. I stepped back into the shadows of the porch, my hand reaching for the silent alarm button on my keychain. The enemy had arrived ahead of schedule. The SUV doors flew open, and the silence of the evening was shattered by the noise of a production crew. It was not Willa. It was Beau, Grant Della, and a dozen strangers carrying heavy camera cases and lighting rigs. They marched toward the front steps of Gull Haven like an invading army, laughing and shouting instructions about camera angles. They were not here to sleep. They were here to seize the territory. I stepped out from the shadows of the porch, flanked by Mr. Henderson from Tideglass and Elias, my attorney. Mr. Henderson raised his tablet, the red recording light blinking steadily in the darkness. "Stop right there," I said, my voice cutting through the rain. Beau froze on the bottom step. He squinted at me, his face twisting into a sneer. "Daphne, what are you doing here? You are ruining the vibe. Get out of the way. Mr. Klein." Elias stepped forward, holding a copy of the contract. "You are in direct violation of the occupancy agreement. Clause 4 states no commercial activity. Clause 7 states no unauthorized guests. You have 12 people here with commercial filming equipment. The contract is void." Beau laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He stepped closer, towering over me. "I am the groom. I am the husband. I have rights to this property through marriage. You can't stop me from bringing my friends to my own honeymoon. Move, or I will sue you for harassment." I looked up at him, calm and cold. The contract does not recognize your marriage license. Beau, it recognizes only the signature and the terms. You broke them. Beau's face turned an ugly shade of red. He lunged forward, pointing a finger in my face. Listen to me, you old hag. I am taking this house. Willa will sign it over by next week, and there is nothing you can do about it. You are just a lonely, bitter woman who is going to die alone in this drafty shack. Thank you, I said softly. That threat is now part of the official record. I pulled out my phone and tapped the app for the smart locks, with a single swipe. The green light on the front door keypad turned red. A loud electronic chirp signaled that the master code had been scrambled. Access revoked, I said. You are now trespassing? Beau turned to shout at Grant, but headlights blinded us all. A white sedan skidded into the driveway behind Beau's SUV. The door opened, and Willa stepped out. She was still in her reception dress, the hem muddy and wet, her hair wild from the wind. She had seen the email. Mom, she gasped, running toward the porch. What is happening? Who are these people? Ask your husband, I said, pointing to the crates of vodka-branded backdrops and the lighting rigs. He sold your honeymoon to a sponsor, and he planned to take the house. I handed Willa the printout of the text message where Beau bragged about the house being his retirement plan. She read it, her hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. She looked up at the equipment, then at the contract violation notice, and finally at Beau. You told me this was for us. Willa stammered. You said it was private. Beau grabbed her arm, his charm replaced by panic. Don't listen to her. Willa. She is crazy. She is trying to ruin us. Just tell her to unlock the door. We can fix this. We need to get the shot for the Morning Post. Willa pulled her arm back. She looked at the man she had married 3 hours ago, really seeing him for the first time. He was not worried about her feelings. He was worried about the Morning Post. You used me, Willa whispered. You cut my mother out of the wedding so you could steal her house. She burst into tears, the sobbing of a child who realizes the monster is real. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Mom, I am so sorry. I didn't know. Please. I looked at her, and my heart broke. But my resolve did not. I know you didn't know, Willa. And I can forgive you for being foolish, but I will not give you the keys to my life again, not even to you. I nodded to Mr. Henderson. He dialed the local police. Within 10 minutes, 2 cruisers arrived. The officers took statements regarding the trespassing and the attempted fraud. Beau and Grant were escorted off the property, shouting threats that no one listened to. Willa stood alone in the driveway as the rain began to fall harder. She had a choice to make: get back in the car with the man who viewed her as an asset, or walk away and start over. I did not wait to see what she chose. That was her story to write. I walked back into Gull Haven and turned the deadbolt. The sound was heavy and final. I was alone. But I was safe, and for the first time in years, the house felt entirely mine. Thanks so much for listening to my story. It was a wild ride, wasn't it? I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this takedown, please smash that like button, subscribe to Nora Revenge Stories, and hit the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who love some good old-fashioned justice. Catch you in the next one.